Hey, what's going on, guys, and welcome back to another Fallout 4 modding video. Today, it is time for yet another Commonwealth Weaponry expansion release. We are looking at the Makeshift 32 SMG. Now, you may recognize this weapon just a little bit, as it is sort of reminiscent of something known as a Boars. This is essentially just a scrappy makeshift weapon intended to be made by settlers and raiders. This is definitely something that would fit in Fallout, as we already have this in vanilla in the form of the pipe gun, but I like to think of this weapon as a bit more of a refined pipe gun. The vanilla pipe guns are just a little bit weird, so I think this one's a little bit nicer. So this is intended to be an early game weapon. It is not innately a replacer to the pipe guns. It is a standalone weapon, as that is just how I prefer to release things. But you can, of course, have this as a replacer. It's a really easy thing to do. I think I still have a video up on how to replace weapons over on YouTube, but if you want to replace this, you can do so. There may be a patch already. If not, it's really easy to do so yourself over in Xedit. But if you do enjoy the pipe guns and you like having the options available in the attachment pack, you can have this as a standalone companion to have even more variety in the Commonwealth, and I'm always a big proponent of variety. Now, as I said, this thing is an early game weapon, and it spawns at level 1. It's been a while since we've made a level 1 gun, not since the 22 pack have we had one, and I think this one fits perfectly. It's going to be very low damage, full auto only, which does make it a little bit more distinct in its role from the vanilla pipe guns. And it is going to use munitions to use a 32 caliber cartridge. Now, again, this is something that is totally customizable to you. If you don't like 32, you can customize it to use 38 instead if you'd prefer a vanilla cartridge. The reason I picked 32, though, is because it is one of the lowest damage calibers in all of Fallout, and munitions is there to bring back all the old Fallout ammo types. So I think 32 fits perfect for this weapon, and for those of you who are using munitions like me, we don't have a ton of options for 32, and I thought this was a perfect fit. So yeah, an awesome early game, highly customizable little SMG with a ton of cool looking scrappy parts using 32, and of course this thing even has custom animations, which is very nice. A really fleshed out little pipe gun. On top of all that, this thing is of course added to the leveled list, so you can find it out in the world, and you'll find this thing pretty much everywhere. It's very similar to the pipe guns in vanilla. You can find this thing on settlers, minutemen, raiders, gunners, Diamond City Security, you name it. It can be found pretty much everywhere. This is something that I expect a lot of people to have. Now, realistically, every single one of these would vary a little bit in its design, much like the real handmade-ish weapons, but this is going to work pretty well. It has a lot of parts to make this look a little bit different every time you find one, and it does have fully randomized attachments when you do find them. On top of all the existing diversity for the base weapon, there's also a handful of uniques you can find. We only planned on having 2 this time around, but we ended up with 3, as we just had some good ideas we wanted to get put into this weapon, so I'll show those off in a little bit more detail very shortly. I do believe that that covers all of the basics for this weapon. Let's go ahead and start checking out some of its finer details, starting off with its stats. So here we are in-game with the most basic version of the Makeshift 32 SMG. This thing has a base damage of around 14. That's probably a little bit lower for everybody else. I do have some perks on. Again, these are fairly integral to my load order, so I can't really remove them at the moment. It does use the 32 caliber cartridge, again, something you can change out if you so wish with a patch. A fire rate of 113, again, this is in full auto only, as it is intended to be a nice little blaster for the early game. A range of 134, an accuracy of 49, a weight of 6.7 pounds, pretty heavy for an early game gun, but it is pretty much a big chunk of steel, and a value of only 32 caps. You're going to be finding these things pretty often. You don't want to be able to sell them at a huge profit margin, but they will be pretty common, again, spawning pretty much everywhere. Now, I really like this thing. I took a look at a handful of different types of the Boars design and picked all of my favorite aspects, as all of them are very different from each other. There's no one dedicated design. Again, these are supposed to be makeshift, scrappy. So I liked some very key designs. I like this sort of safety setup here, as well as the traditional tube receiver with the nice big barrel front end right here, and then also a top-mounted ejection port. Now, typically these would actually have a left-handed charging handle, but we did opt for right-handed animations, as that is going to be a little bit better for the animations we had access to. We have some really nice animations for this guy, which I guess we can show off right about now. While we are checking out animations, I suppose we can check out its accuracy as well. I mean, you can already see I did a little bit of testing on my own, as these targets are still swinging. So, first of all, let's check out its accuracy. you'll see that we can hit pretty much anything as you tap fire, and it's going to hit pretty accurately, surprisingly, for this weapon. And as for the reload, we got some really nice reload animations shared by the Kapars, these made by Hitman. Now then, in full auto, the accuracy of this thing is a little bit different because this thing is full auto only, and that's probably how you're going to use it since it doesn't do a ton of damage, but it is still relatively able to be controlled. It's a bit jumpy, as you can see. I did miss one target there, but I do have a pretty small magazine. That being said, with attachments, this thing is a lot more controllable, and you get a much higher magazine capacity and even rate of fire. But before we check out attachments at the weapons workbench, we do need to talk about a very important part of this mod, and that is the unique options. One of the first uniques we came up with is known as the Pipe Dream, a reference to the fact that this weapon is basically made out of a giant pipe, but also the idea that peace is a pipe dream, and that's why this thing is covered in peace signs. It's a hippie gun, and a third entendre, which is going to be, this thing does have the junky legendary effect since it is a bit of a hippie gun. It's going to do increasing amounts of damage the more withdrawal effects you are suffering from. It's a legendary effect that most people don't really make builds around, but I thought it was pretty fitting for this weapon, and it's an early game gun. The legendaries can't be that powerful. This thing is pretty cool looking though, I have to say. I'm quite a fan of its design. If you want to get your hands on this one, it's actually going to be found near the Sunshine Tidings Co-op. There is a makeshift shelter with a dead raider. Go up the hill near the co-op and you'll find this guy. A nice little reference since we do have a pretty hippie-ish robot over at the co-op. Now, of course, since this is a pretty handmade SMG, we could not have not had a Raider variant. So we have the Scavers SMG. This thing is really, really fun. It has a nice red and yellow paint job, a lot of popping color with the blue tape there, some handmade parts in the form of a makeshift grip and stock, as well as a makeshift compensator made out of some welded nuts. This thing is really cool looking, and it has a really nice legendary effect. This thing's going to do more damage with each consecutive hit on the same target. This is known as the Furious effect. You don't really see it that often in vanilla, but it is a really, really fun one. So it rewards you for your accuracy. If you can keep hitting the same guy without missing, you'll get more and more damage on him, and which is pretty helpful for a low damage gun like this. Now, if you want to find this one, it's in a pretty early game location, and that is going to be pretty close to Abernathy Farm. If you head northwest, you will find the little raider camp hidden underneath a power line. And that is where this thing is located. It's an unmarked location, but it's pretty easy to find. Just follow the power lines northwest from Abernathy Farm, and you'll find a tiny little camp with a couple of raiders. Now, the last unique we have was sort of a last-minute addition. This thing was made in basically the last 5 minutes of the dev cycle. We have Tooth and Nail, made purely because I wanted to add a boatload of spikes to this weapon, which looks absolutely ridiculous, but it is quite funny. This thing does have the Bleed legendary effect, making it pretty dang powerful. As you hit each target, it is going to add a stack of bleed, which can build up pretty fast with a high rate of fire gun. That being said, the base damage is pretty low, so it's sort of a death by 1,000 cuts idea. If you want to get your hands on this one, you can actually find it over in Hardware Town, so not as early game as some of the other options here, which makes sense that this is probably one of the strongest uniques available, but it is still pretty dang cool, really funky aesthetic. I'm personally not going to be running this one, but it might be perfect for one of you guys out there if you have a Raider build or somebody who just is really in love with sharp things. Now then, of course, we need to talk about the attachments over at the weapons workbench. We have your standard set of receivers again, all in full auto, but there are quite a bit of them available. Then we have the short barrel, long barrel, short ported barrel, a long ported barrel, a finned barrel option added by Pig last minute. I really didn't intend for this, but there it is as yet another option. We have a heavy barrel, which adds some nice ventilation, and of course a suppressed barrel to make this thing even more tubular. We have a standard grip, a makeshift grip, which is going to be a nice scrappy looking option, a taped grip, which is going to be the standard grip with a little bit more recoil accuracy. We have a comfort grip, which is nice, a black plastic with some nice finger grooves, and then a recoil grip based off of a Plum AK style grip. So we have a big variety here of different makeshift style parts, as well as some really manufactured parts, as if people were taking pieces from other guns and just throwing it onto this thing to make it a little bit more high quality, which I think improves on the scrappy aesthetic. For magazines, we have the standard magazine with a quick eject option, as well as medium and quick eject, and then of course a long and quick eject, giving you 22, 33, and 44 capacity mags respectively. For the scopes, we have a standard iron sight, the glow iron sights, a makeshift reflex sight made out of a spoon, a makeshift hollow sight, which has a really fun reticle, as you can see right there, a makeshift combat scope, which is also a fun reticle, though it is a bit harder to use. As you can see, it's a little all over the place. You can't really see it here, but when you do zoom in this thing in first person, it says bad guy right above that arrow, so you know exactly what you're shooting at. We have some standard reflex, hollow, and combat optics, and they even have a short scope, which is basically the longest scope you can get for this thing, as you really shouldn't be sniping with it, but it is there as an option. You have makeshift and manufactured, so you can really customize this thing to look exactly how you want. For muzzles, we have the option for no muzzle, a makeshift bayonet, a makeshift compensator, a makeshift muzzle brake, and a makeshift suppressor made out of a Nuka-Cola can, which is really fun on this gun. We also have some more manufactured parts in the form of a flash hider, a compensator, a muzzle brake, and a standard suppressor. So you can throw this on the end of any barrel you wish if you don't want to use the suppressed barrel. So you can combine the stats of different options and get your own aesthetic based on what you like it to look like. And finally, that leaves us with the stock section, where we have the option for no stock, a makeshift stock, which is really cool, made out of 2 pieces of bent metal, and a nice big leather butt pad. We have the full stock made out of wood, a light stock, which is a nice little folder, and a recoil compensating stock. This one, again, meant to be paired with that AK grip, as this is an AK underfolder. Pretty cool. You can match those both together for a really interesting aesthetic for this weapon. Basically, mix and match these parts however you want to make your dream pipe gun. This thing has a lot of options, making this very versatile, really cool. You can have a tiny little blaster like this, or something with a pretty long profile, almost the size of a full-size rifle. Really up to you. So yeah, guys, that is going to wrap it up for the makeshift 32 SMG. We haven't really done a super makeshifty gun in a while, so this is a new option. Again, you can use it to replace the pipe guns, you can use it as a standalone, it's up to you. It's a really fun little early game gun, though. Pick this thing up right at level 1. It's not going to last you forever, but it'll be quite fun while you have it. And more importantly, it adds more variety to your enemies. That's what I really like in weapon mods, is making sure I don't see the same old thing over and over. So having some more early game variety is pretty dang cool to me. If you want to check this mod out, it'll be linked down in the description on Nexus. I am not sure if it has been ported to Xbox yet. I don't really handle that side of things, but I'm sure there will be a port up sometime soon if there isn't already. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoyed the mod. If you did, consider dropping a like and an endorsement respectively. And as always, if you'd like to support my work directly, you can do so using the link down in the description to support me on Patreon. Just a nice little donation platform if you're into that kind of thing, but of course, it is not required, completely optional. With that, as always, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!